Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro RPG. The end of another week, the end of another poll. We've got an absolutely massive win for Gangbusters. Now this is going to be a PDF review, so we'll be going over to the computer desktop in a wee second, because I don't actually own a physical copy of this one. But as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other poll related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been informed know that if they pull a knife, you pull a gun. If they put one of yours in the hospital, you put one of theirs in the morgue, and that's the Chicago way. Now if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, and I sure wish you would, then there's a Patreon in the description down below, and you can get access to these videos a week early, you can get access to other levels of patronage, so if you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at Gangbusters. So, this is Gangbusters, which came out from TSR in 1982. Now this is a version I've downloaded off the Internet Archive, and it's an OCR version, so some of the characters are kind of wrong. If we flick on a couple of pages, it seems to have definitely not recognised the N in Gangbusters there, coming up with something which looks a bit Norwegian, to tell the truth. But mainly it's readable, there's just that major blunder. Now, as I said, this came out in 1982, and a further edition came out in 1990, which is rules-wise identical to this one. It just compiled a few extra bits and came in more. So this version is 68 pages. And the second edition, which they mislabeled as third edition, is 148 pages. So there's a lot more in there, but it's stuff that's covered in adventures and supplements for the original. There are no actual rule changes. Now this came as a box set, as did most of TSR's role-playing games at the time. And in the box, as well as some dice, some maps, we had an adventure, Mad Dog Johnny Drake, an introductory module, which we'll have a look through in a bit. Now, this was a suggestion that I cover it from one of the viewers. And the way they sold this to me was absolutely fantastic. They were telling me that it's a role-playing game where players can play gangsters or they can play law enforcement, playing against one another. It's also a solo player role-playing game, so if you can't get people together, you can play it by yourself. Now, that's all kind of true. The game is set in the 1920s, during sort of Prohibition, during the gangs, Al Capone, that sort of era. It creates its own settlement rather than using a historical place. And the players can be the law enforcement, they can be the untouchables, or they can be the mafia, or gang members, or thugs, or whatever they want to play. You can be a private detective in that hard-boiled detective era. But while you can choose to be all these, it is problematic for a games master to run it if all the players are playing different things. So while it gives you all these options, it does kind of expect you to all be playing gangsters or all be playing law enforcement at the same time. Otherwise, some of you are going to be getting to go at certain times while waiting for the others at other times. It would become a bit unwieldy to run. But it gives you all these options. It gives you a world to drop your players into, and they can choose what way they want to approach this world. Whether they want to be law enforcement, they want to be gangsters, they want to be private eyes, they want to do 1920s gangster-type activities as whatever they want. And the solo player mod. Well, I actually have a look at the adventure, because this is an introductory module which you can also play solo play. Because, if we flick into it a few pages, we can see that it's a choose-your-own-adventure style. So you start here, you may follow him to your car, turn to entry 42, or you may follow him on foot, turn to entry 24. Be sure to note that you have left your car. So it's a choose-your-own-adventure thing. We saw these in a lot. I remember one of the versions of Paranoia having a choose-your-own-adventure. I know that West End Games did it a lot, because they definitely did it in multiple of the Star Wars books, the rule books especially, but also they did it in a couple of modules. I think there was absolutely a choose-your-own-adventure style module for the Star Wars D6 system. So you could just play it by yourself, using the RPG rules, but going through it and choosing your decisions from the options. So while it says it's a single player role-playing game, it's not as the way that modern ones do it, where they've got extra rules to allow it to avoid needing a games master. This one was just your old choose your own adventure style books. Inside, there's a nice introduction. The introduction on the later version is actually by the son or grandson of one of the Untouchables detectives themselves, so it was quite heavily backed up. But the introduction here is a wee story about Lakefront City, the setting of Gangbusters. The artwork's quite nice. It's a little dated now, but it's a dated role-playing game. It's set in the 1920s, so that holds up pretty well. We've got forward, which talks through civilized societies setting down laws, qualities of an ideal law enforcement officer, qualities of a successful gangster. They both have courage and toughness and investigative mind, deviousness, but one side's got loyalty and honesty and the other's got lack of loyalty and dishonesty. What the game's about. So an introduction to role-playing games. It's a role-playing game, an advanced form of make-believe. Learning to play. Creating characters. So it talks you through how to create a character. We've got punching tables, what the ability scores mean. So you've got muscle, agility, observation, presence, driving, luck, hit points and injury. Now, as usual, I'll be doing a rules breakdown, but the way I'm starting to do these is I'm staggering them a bit, so that's probably going to be next week by the time I get round to it. We talk through ability checks, the luck check, sequence of play outline, so how combat's going to work out, surprise, arcs of fire, all the sort of common role-playing game rules on how to handle it. And it's a fairly simple system. What else we got? Foot movement actions. We've got gunfights, how to do them, special weapons, gunfight modifiers. So we've got things like target standing still. There's a locked door in the way. Firing character is prone or firing a burst. So lots of modifiers so you can take in what your character's doing to your skill rolls. I've heard people talk about this being a bit like Boots Hill, as if the combat's taken from that, which makes a lot of sense because it is gunfighting rules, something that Dungeons & Dragons didn't really have. Shooting into a fistfight, vehicles and gunfights, fistfights, guns in fistfights, dealing with so many different situations. It is very well fleshed out. We've got car movements, so you do car chases, crash locations. Example of movement and fighting, so talking through all the combat rounds as we do a movement and fighting action scene. How to design your own adventures. Characters in campaigns, character backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, how to handle money, character advancement and experience points, improving basic abilities, what the skills are, so we've got auto theft, fingerprinting, alarm systems, accounting, ballistics, lots of thuggerish type skills, but also the higher level ones for the gang bosses. How to start a campaign. Campaign play. Example of campaign gameplay. So we're talking through it. We've got careers, so you can start off in law enforcement, private investigation, newspaper reporting, or crime are the four broad sectors you can start in. So you're not just into law enforcement or crime, you can have private investigators who are somewhere in between, and newspaper reporters, bringing that light to criminal activities. When we go through, so we've got careers in law enforcement, including agent corruption, how to play prohibition agents, FBI agents, how to play an FBI agent, local police officers with their salaries. What else we got? Careers in private professions. So we've got private investigators, obtaining special cases. We've got newspaper reporters, newspaper reporter XP. Careers in crime, so you can be an independent criminal, a gang member, organised crime syndicate. How you gain experience, armed robbery tables, fencing goods, how to sell off your ill-gotten gains. Crimes committed by organised crime syndicates, so bootlegging. What else we got here? Lots on bootlegging, speakeasies, and numbers games, slot machines, casinos, racketeering, how to deal with NPCs, how to quickly create them, what their levels are going to be like, what skills they have, their reactions to people, loyalty to other characters, persuading them, how honest they're likely to be, or especially for police, how honest they're likely to be, how encounters are likely to go, witness and bystanders, so when you're committing your crimes, you're robbing somewhere, whether there are people going to be reporting to police. We've got NPC politicians, because of course corrupting the politicians is a big part of being a gangster. We've got special rules, so public opinion and heat. So if you're doing terrible enough crimes, the public opinion is going to go against you, the police are going to get extra funding and come out against you much harder. Newspapers, how they can rally people against the gangs, churches, hospitals, bank loans you can take. The long arm of the law, so plea bargaining, trials, what evidence is going to be introduced, jury tampering to get away with your crimes, civil suits, sentencing, parole, the Prohibition Act. Then we've got a section on the game judge, so the judge's rule, preparing your players, making the game more fun, flow of play, balance, what characters can know, improvising, player interaction. And then we've got optional expert rules, so expert gunfight rules, hit locations and variable injuries, cover, expert fist fighting rules, expert car rules, all just giving that extra level of detail to it. We've got appendices, so typical NPCs. We've got price lists for different weapons, from revolvers to clothes to real estate, industrial land, renting a cheap hotel room. Wages, so if you want to have a bar, if you're running a speakeasy, you can hire bar staff, or you factory workers, salesmen, etc. Miscellaneous expenses, so how much you're spending on your car and gas and oil, how much you're paying on your lawyers. And then we've got a bunch of rogues, so criminal class, Arizona Barker, Arthur Barker. I'm guessing the Barker gang, Alphonse Capone. Bonnie Parker, I recognise that name. Famous gangs, the Dillinger Gang. So we've got law enforcement, so we've got the Untouchables with Elliot Ness. This is of course before the movie of the same name came out. We've got different FBI agents. We've got a sample character sheet to use, the index, and a GM reference page on the back with sequence of play. And the adventure, as I said, it's set up as a choose-your-own-adventure, but you can play it with a group of players, because we've got 4 pre-rolled characters here with their stats, and we can track out what they do in different turns of combat, what wounds they take, etc. And then we've got the module itself, keeping track of things, decision-making, using the map, using the counters to move around, and we've got the different entries, so choosing your entry, turn to entry 7, turn to entry 14. You may leave Harrigan's and wait outside at the corner. You leave Harrigan's and wait outside in your car. You may take the empty seats at the bar. Or you may walk inside and stand just inside the doorway, studying the patrons. And it's a typical choose-your-own-adventure type adventure, but you're using the Gangbusters rules, you're using hit points and rolling out combat as if you would be playing the full role-playing game. And you'll be gaining experience at the end. So we've got all the sections. There's 102 sections to do through. This ends the adventure. Mad Dog Jenny Drake, you are now ready for more exciting adventures in the world of your Gangbusters role-playing game. And a nice, if very square and blocky picture of a guy trying to get away and leap into his already shot up escape vehicle. So that is Gangbusters, or at least the first edition of it. I'm not going to go into the second edition at the moment, or the third edition rather. It's really quite interesting. The way its mythology is built up within the role-playing community, that it has all these such modern things, solo player games that you can choose to be players working against each other, aren't really true. They're possible, but it's nothing that different from everything else. But again, this is 1980s, so this is doing them all first. I don't know whether there was any choose-your-own-adventures sections in any other role-playing game before this. So this is very much a start of this tradition, which West End Games definitely rode with, and a bunch of other people have done since. And giving you the options to play law enforcement or criminals has built up this mythology that people will do that, but in reality you're just choosing one group, otherwise the game gets very unwieldy. But it does give the players that choice that, yeah, we're going to play the 1920s and we're going to be the crime guys this time. Or we've just been the Untouchables and we want to gun down bad guys. We want to be the hero cops saving the day. It's really interesting. It gives a lot of options, but the mythology, as I said, around the game has built up rather more than what it offers. So that was Gangbusters, and that absolutely romped home this week with some 46% of the vote. An absolutely massive win. And that's great to see, because as I said before, this was a suggestion from a viewer. And I'm loving the way this is working out. In the past, when I started off this channel, it was all about me introducing people to books from my collection, things that perhaps they hadn't seen before, and letting them experience the world of role-playing materials which came out in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, etc. And now we're getting to the situation where it's reversing, and my viewers are making suggestions to me on things I can look at and learn about for the first time, which is an absolute joy. So please, if you've got any suggestions, please make them in the comments down below. I'll put them in polls, we'll see what people want, and we'll have a look at them if they win. But anyway, as I said, that came in on 46%. Behind that was The Last Crusaders in second place for Deadlands Hell on Earth on 16%. In joint third place was the Dark Tech sourcebook for Dark Conspiracy and World Book 4 Africa for Rifts on 13% each, and behind was the Darklands for the Lone Wolf role-playing game, which came in on only 10%. I'd have loved to have covered all of those, as I always do, but this was something new to me and it's been an absolute joy. Anyway, all of those are cleared out and we're going back to a Retro Adventures poll. So, first up, we've got Total Eclipse for Shadowrun from 1992. Now, this is a very early adventure, but it's the last of the very early ones I've got left to cover. I've kind of covered everything around it. So I thought it was time to give Total Eclipse a chance. It's a classic adventure. I remember having a load of fun playing it when I was playing Shadowrun back in the 90s. Second up, we've got Tales from the Ether for Space 1889 from Games Designers Workshop, and it came out in 1989. Now, people have criticised the way I say ether, first of all. It should be ether or whatever. I tend to classify them, if it's technical, it's ether. If it's medical, it's ether. But I know people criticise the way I pronounce it. I pronounce all sorts of things wrong. But anyway, this is a book of 5 different adventures for Space 1889. That steampunk setting. These are set in different places across the solar system. So there's an adventure on Venus, on Mars, on Earth, and in Earth orbit, as well as other places. It's fantastic and interesting look across the entire range of this setting without just focusing on Mars, as so much of Space 1889 does. After that, we've got The Key of Deliriad for Slay Industries. Now, Slay Industries has a lot of love from me. It's a kind of cyberpunk game, and it's written by Scots in Scotland, so it's the local game to me. Local guys done good. But this was, I think, the only published adventure for it, so it would be a joy to cover, because I have enjoyed looking through the rulebook and the Karma sourcebook in the past. After that, we've got Scared Stiffs for the Ghostbusters RPG. Now, I ran the Ghostbusters RPG recently. I've also covered one of the adventures for it. These are fantastically funny adventures by the same people who wrote Paranoia. And, as I have said, this will be a joy to cover. It will be a laugh, I promise. And finally, we've got the second Seal of Repulsion for Mutant Chronicles. Now, this is the first part of a campaign for Mutant Chronicles. And Mutant Chronicles is a very fun game. It's basically Doom the role-playing game. Your heavily armed space marines and demons are invading the solar system. It's science fiction, but basically you're blowing away monsters. I like the setting, but these don't tend to do terribly well in polls, but maybe this time. Maybe we'll get something and get to look through something different. On other things, well, over on DriveThruRPG, I've been continuing my things for the Victorian setting. I'm putting out books of monsters, of NPCs, both sidekicks and villains. Obviously, Patreons of Laird and Librarian status get access to these through the shared Google Drive in the Patreon. So if you want to look at that, the Patreon's linked down below, as is there a link to DriveThruRPG. And over on RPG Gamer, well, I'm still taking a bit of a break, but this week's been kind of a busy one in the break because it's only a partial break I'm taking. So I've done my review of The Bad Batch, and I'm also covering the Vader comic and the High Republic comic which came out this week, and doing stats for them. And then I'll be going back to my break towards the end of the month. But there'll be more things popping out, especially the update to the YT series designer, because that should be finished this week. Or it'll be in a state to be released this week. But anyway, as usual, I think I've been whittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.